Today in BikesBC we have a new bike. This is a Turbo Levo SL alloy. It's my new workhorse. It's gonna replace my full power Levo, and this time it's my size. It's an S2. I learned from my mistakes and I downsized a lot. The old bike was an S4. This is an S2, significantly smaller. I'm 167 centimeters, or right below 5'6", so this fits me perfectly. And I'm super excited. To be honest, I've ridden it once in from just as soon as I picked it up. It was good, however the bars were too wide, stem wasn't the stem that I like, and suspension wasn't set up quite right, so I didn't think that was a fair first ride. So this is its first proper ride, with the bars cut to 750. My stem, which I think the other one was like 42 millimeters, so it's a 35, so it's pretty comparable. And other than that, it's completely stock. I got ride wrap on it, and that's about it. So let's take it for a ride and let's see what it's like. Super excited. Here, as we climb through this crazy amount of leaves, I can talk a little bit about the bike. So like I said, the bike is a Levo SL aluminum. It's the cheapest bike on the SL range, but it's also the only alloy bike in the SL range. I like alloy, especially on a bike like my e-bike, which gets ridden a lot, and it's usually the one that I crash on the most, since the reason I have an e-bike is to be able to do more runs and try new things. So with those things in mind, I really do like having an alloy bike, since they are tougher and honestly easier to diagnose. Carbon, if you take a hit big enough, you might not be able to see it, but the frame might be damaged. And on something like my e-bike, that, like I said, is my workhorse, it's just something that I don't want to deal with. Plus it's cheaper, so the added stress of the carbon bike and the extra cost, to me, just didn't make sense. So alloy it is. Comes with Code R brakes, comes with the Mastermind display, which is something that my other alloy full power Turbo Levo didn't have, so that's super nice. Brakes are Code R's, which are better than the G2RE. Comes with the typical Specialized tires, which are in the front, eliminator in the rear. Honestly, for this type of conditions, I think they'll do just fine. Later on, I'll probably replace them for something else, but for now, they'll do great. And yeah, bike is great. The motor gives you about 50 Newton meters of power in turbo, which, by the way, out of the box comes down tuned, like it's not giving you full power. You have to move the slider all the way to the top to get those 50 Newton meters. As you can tell, I have it in trail right now and it feels great. If I was riding with someone on a full power, I'd probably have it in turbo to be able to keep up, and of course they would probably have to come down to trail. But if you're riding by yourself, trail is pretty good. You might be a little bit slower than you would be on a full power e-bike in turbo, or even in trail, but the assistance is plenty. Significantly easier still than any analog bike, and yeah, feels great. Okay, here we go, down into Hueva Jelly. This is a trail I've ridden 100 times on my full power Levo. Now here we are on the SL. First thing you notice is that weight. It's so much lighter than the full power Levo. And once you aim it down, I'll be honest, it's very close to riding my regular bike. Just for reference though, my regular bike is, or it was, a Trek / Gen 6 alloy. It was quite a heavy bike. This is a pretty steep little rock roll / drop. And that thing was heavy. It was a heavy enduro bike, so this thing compared to a heavy enduro bike, pretty comparable. Compared to a trail bike, probably not as comparable. Woo. But yeah, super fun. It feels super lively. Stock suspension does leave a little bit to be desired, so that'll probably be changed. However, the bike feels great. It's super fun. So many leaves on the ground. Yeah, super fun. It's so poppy too. Woo! I love it. This fork, the rhythm is pretty harsh off the top, I gotta say. I'm used to riding my stab, which will probably make its way to this bike eventually. And this 36 rhythm comparison with the stab, I have my sag set up pretty much the exact same, and it does feel harsher at the very beginning of the stroke. I have no compression adjustment on this fork other than the dial to open it or close it. I have it fully open and it feels pretty harsh off the top. Feels good though, just in comparison to the stab. It's a bit harsh. The Code R brakes feel great. I'm used to them because my Flash had Code bronzes, which felt very similar, and I really like them. And there's a drop coming up here where we're gonna get to test this stock suspension. That, I'm not gonna lie, feels so smooth. Like so smooth. I gotta say that has to be the weight, because the suspension is not as good as I had on my full power at the end, and this felt way smoother, and that's gotta be just because of how much lighter it is, which is awesome. Honestly, that was one of my biggest gripes with riding the e-bike. That big hits, you do feel like you're landing so much harder. And on this thing, it feels great. Very wet. Oh wow, yeah, this feels awesome on those slightly bigger hits. This tire, so at least by the thread pattern, they do look a little bit more wet conditions friendly than the cannibals that I had on the full power Levo. Let's try jump. Wow, it just pops so good. Now let's go something a little techier. And I say techie for this little mountain, because really there's not much actual tech here. He pops so nice. Okay, we're coming up to a really steep rock roll. It's one of those times where the longer bike just gave me a little bit of extra confidence. We'll see how it feels on the much smaller S2. Here we go. Here comes our rock roll. Honestly, it felt great. I can get my weight over that rear tire better, and that gives me more confidence. The camera never does it justice, but this trail is pretty steep, and with this amount of these leaves, it's also pretty slippery. Now we have a little wooden steep roll. You can see, do you see that? I just slept there. And then there's this little wooden center. Super fun. This thing pops so much more than the full power that I almost cleared the rock, and I usually land right on it. Ooh, super fun so far. I'm really liking this bike. Okay, so I've done 3 climbs of this mountain, which honestly I'm not entirely sure. It's not a lot of, I think it's like 4 kilometers to the top. That might be too much. I think it's like 2.5-ish kilometers to the top of riding. But overall, we're at 52 minutes of riding, 3 uphills. I'm sitting at 34%. In average, I'm using about 25% on each uphill on this mountain, which means I could get 4. And typically on my full power e-bike, I do 3 or 4 runs here, and that's good. So without the range extender, I could do the same amount of riding that I typically would do on my full power on this thing. It's kind of what it's seeming like. Now, this is just by myself going for a quick ride. For longer rides, I do feel like that range extender would be necessary, just based on my current body situation. So that's something to keep in consideration, because that adds, I think, about 1 kilogram. So this thing is almost 20 kilos, you're sitting at 21, full power is about 24, so you're still pretty light. And you can set it to drain the range extender first, so technically you could drop it off after your first or second lap. Specialist doesn't recommend that, but you could. Anyway, so far seems like it's doing great, and for rides like this, that is kind of what I do most of the time. The internal battery would be just fine, so the range extender would really only be for the longer days in the saddle. So far, it's feeling great. Now, if you're thinking about that saddle and about how high it's sitting, Specialized for some reason puts a 125 dropper on the S2, even though they recommend the S2 up to 168 centimeters in height. So yeah, don't agree with that. I have a 1-up dropper coming in the mail. Should be here today actually, a 180, which will probably bring me down to about here, because that looks kind of ridiculous. But yeah, so far it's doing real good. Under the rock. Whoa, this thing is like so playful and maneuverable. Up on the rock. It's a little tricky to start up here. I don't know why I stopped. Oh, got it. So cool. This is where this bike really excels, like slightly faster flowing trails with tight turns. This thing feels awesome. Going to a few jumps here. This one's bigger than it looks. Woo! He pops so nice. Super nice. let's see. Yeah, I need to put a little more air on the rear shock. One thing is that this Float X has no compression adjustment, just rebound, and this thing that goes from firm to not firm. And I guess, no, yes, these coasts are open. So I'd say this is the weakest link so far on the bike, the rear suspension. First thing that is gonna go. But even with it, I'll put a bit more air on it. It's feeling real good. So far this bike is plenty fun. Gotta say, I really like it. And that rear suspension is doable. I'm just gonna have to air it up a little bit more, which will make it a little harsher than I would like to. But considering that I'm gonna change the suspension anyways, it's fine. I could go get tokens and put them in. That's another option. But I'm planning on changing that rear shock anyways. Super fun overall though. I really enjoyed this little Turbo Levo SL. Time for my final first thoughts on this thing. After a full day of riding it on trails that I've ridden 100 times. First off, I'll start by saying I really like it. It is a sweet bike. The package overall is really good. Has 150 suspension in the rear, 160 in the front. Honestly, it feels like it has more. My full power Levo, I had it at the end with 170 fork on the front, 38, and combined with my Cascade Link on the rear, I had 170, 160. So 10mm increase both front and rear, and it felt like it was bottoming it out faster than this thing, even though I think I need to put a little bit more air on the shock on the back of this bike. Overall though, it's doing really great. On the way up, the 50 Newton meters of power, in my opinion, are plenty. I don't feel like I need more. And on the way down, it's easy to forget that you have an e-bike underneath you, which is exactly what I wanted. Don't get me wrong, it's still heavy. It feels like a really heavy enduro bike, which is, my Slash was a really heavy enduro bike, so it feels pretty close to that. And I love it. Super poppy, super friendly, loves the twisties. That 27-inch rear wheel is great, is what I'm used to, and I love it. I wouldn't put anything else on it just because I really do love how poppy and maneuverable this bike is. But yeah, overall, I'm very happy with it. And if you have a Levo or a full power bike and are considering an SL, I gotta say, it's great. If you like ripping in turbo all the time, this is not it. If you like me, use your full power mostly in trail, you probably won't miss it, because this thing, even in trail, felt plenty powerful. Anyways, that's my first impressions on my Levo SL. There will be lots of videos coming up on this bike, but for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on my next video.